Okay, so there's other types of exploratory research that we can conduct, right? We don't just have to sit in the shadows observing people, creepily lurking, watching their behaviors and their moves. We can actually talk to them, right? And there's a couple of different ways that we can talk to them that we're going to talk about in this video. They're focus groups or interviews, or talking to people in groups or one on one as a researcher. The first of these is a focus group, and many of you have probably participated in a focus group or something like it. Right? Classrooms and the way that we used to experience them were similar to focus groups. Right? There was a facilitator, there was an audience. The facilitator had a guide. They typically use like a PowerPoint presentation, or they might even have some notes. They all always had information about you, the student, and they had questions that they wanted to ask and ways that they wanted to probe to get information out of the participants. So I could substitute students for consumers. I could substitute a professor for a marketing researcher. And we have the good foundation for a focus group. Right? It is an opportunity for the company to get natural, free-flowing, at least close to natural and free-flowing conversation about a product concept or an advertising campaign or some other element of the marketing process that can be discussed by stakeholders in the marketing activity. So these are some of the things that you need, right? One thing that to focus on is number 4, this way to record. You don't necessarily want to leave that up to the assistant to try and take notes for what everybody says. It's best, as long as you have everybody's permission, to just record the things that are said. If you can get them to allow you to record video, even better. So, because sometimes nonverbal responses to things that you present can provide information, and the way that they feed off of each other to provide either verbal or nonverbal could be informative. But these are the things that you need to conduct a focus group. And remember, across the top here, I have what's going on here, because remember, that is exactly what a focus group is going to help us understand. But why? Why would we do a focus group over an observation? Well, on one hand, having people talk in groups of other consumers might reduce their uneasiness, right? It might make them more comfortable, make them more willing to share, right? You might have experienced this when in a group of your friends. It's easier for you to feel comfortable contributing to a conversation if some people are already talking, right? Um, this happens to me, right? If I'm on Twitter, this just happened on Sunday. I'm on Twitter watching people talk about the NFL playoffs, and I don't necessarily think of myself as some, armchair quarterback, somebody who can comment thoughtfully on NFL happenings. But if I see somebody else comment on it, I can maybe quote tweet or reply to their message and say something that I feel about the show. Feel more confident, more comfortable in sharing, because there's a collective kind of approach to the conversation as opposed to me just putting out my own tweet. That same kind of logic is what underlies why you might want to give a focus group. You might want to give people an opportunity to bounce ideas off of each other and to build towards some ideas about a product that is collaborative. Okay. Some of the pros and cons about doing a focus group, inviting these people to talk about your product or your idea or your brand or your service. The benefits of that, you allow the dynamics of the group to stimulate ideas in this free-flowing nature, right? As opposed to me asking an individual, let's say, a question, waiting on them to respond, and then hopefully having the skill to transition them away from a topic into a deeper topic or to a separate topic. Instead of that, I have the benefit of having other people in the room to allow the conversation to take a different form or a different direction. So what often happens, in a focus group, is that, let's say I show you this bottle design. I say, what do you think about it? As a facilitator, I say, what do you think about it? Somebody in the group might say, hey, I really like that bottle design. It looks like a lot of the bottles that I've drank out of before. Somebody else says, yeah, sure. I drink out of bottles look like that all the time. Then the third person in the room who's just been stewing because they're like, no, I don't drink bottles, or I don't drink waters out of bottles like that. I care about the environment. right? I drink out of stuff like this. And because those other people might have voiced their opinion, they might have felt emboldened or at least responsible to even provide another side. Another listener might have also thought, well, yeah, I like plastic or steel tumblers as well because they save the environment. But I like a different design. Your bottle that you showed me is great, but if they had a tumbler in that exact form, fashion, I might have liked that. So it allows the conversation to free flow in these new and unique different ways that may not happen when it's just one on one. Embedded in that pro about doing focus groups is this notion of getting real time feedback. If you put out a survey, for instance, you got to wait. You got to wait. Typically, even in today's technology, you still have to wait hours to get back responses from survey respondents. In a focus group, the responses you get is in real time. You get to see people's facial reaction to the product that you put in front of them, their verbal reactions, and that's valuable because what they do immediately after seeing something, as opposed to after having time to reflect and think about, well, what's the best way to say this or react with my face or anything, could give you information, could give you data to then make a decision. This last point is also important in that after conducting a focus group, the focus group participants are now stakeholders in the thing that you're trying to do. Right? Imagine being a focus group for Tesla Model 3. And they want people to see how the design looks on the inside of the car, and comment on how they think the engine should run or the battery should run, rather. Now the people who leave that focus group feel like they have some stake in Model 3's success. Not only might they patronize, purchase, think about, consider a Tesla Model 3 for themselves, they might also talk about it. That word of mouth is invaluable to a marketer. So these are some of the benefits, right? On that flip side, there are definitely some cons, right? It can be overwhelming for an untrained facilitator to try to manage a group of individuals. Just think about, being in a classroom where you've not had a positive experience with a professor who was unable to manage an unruly group of students, or maybe just a particularly boisterous group. It's only unruly if the moderator or the facilitator isn't trained well enough to manage a group in the different directions that it might go. Right? Moreover, one con, or somebody could say that a con, is that the results that you get from a focus group rely on subjective interpretation of the participants' comments. So if somebody says that, okay, that bottle is great, we rely upon the researcher to interpret for us what great means. Does that mean we should launch it or not? Right? And the second point kind of ties into this third one, in that what you find from a focus group, like just about any kind of research, is suggestive and not conclusive. It only suggests a conclusion. It doesn't say that this is the only conclusion, or this is even the right conclusion. It just provides evidence in support of a particular direction or against. But it does not conclude that a thing is positive or negative. Okay? So on Blackboard, I'll provide actual links to these example focus groups that take place in person or virtually. Many of you may consider doing a virtual focus group with some stakeholders related to your team project. I highly encourage it. It can be fun, even though at first it might be a little overwhelming. But with the right guide, with the right facilitator guide, right, the questions, information about the participants, probes to get more information out of the participants, it can be a very enlightening conversation. So I'll put these videos up for you on Blackboard. Just a reminder, here are some of the needs that you have to have in order to conduct a focus group. Now let's get into depth interviews, right? So instead of talking to a group of people, we could also talk to just one other person. And in terms of need, they look very similar to a focus group, right? You need the interviewer, you need an interview guide that has questions, notes about the participant. There's only one other person this time. You also need a thing to record. But there's some specific reasons why you might want to do an interview versus a focus group. And one of them is that sometimes the thing that you're talking about might be sensitive to the point that people may not feel comfortable divulging or elaborating on an idea. It could be as innocuous as a clothing brand. Sometimes people are embarrassed about the clothing brands that they wear or commenting on why they like them. But it could also be risky. It could also be a bit scandalous. Think about lingerie. People may not want to sit in a group of other individuals and talk about the ins and outs of the undergarments. From a different perspective, an interview might also be more suitable for somebody who likes attention, likes to have the floor. In a focus group, it's easy for other people to steal your thunder, right? Somebody might have said what you said or wanted to say and didn't even say it in the right way, right? You might be thinking in your head, man, if I would have had the opportunity to say it, I would have been so much better. I would have made the point even clearer. But now that they said it, I don't want to just say what they said. And you're having this whole internal conversation while the focus group is going on, and that's of no use to the moderator, no use to the facilitator or the company who's funding the whole thing. In an interview, though, you have the absolute attention of the interviewee and of the interviewer. So now you're the star of the show. And so this explores or starts to tap into why we might want to interview. If we have a sensitive topic, if we need more deeper responses, we might want to interview. But we also have these key informants or these potential stars of our shows out there who could be particularly willing to divulge, elaborate on a topic just because of their level of expertise. So for me, somebody like this in my life is my brother. And he's a tech guy, always has been. He used to take apart our remote control cars as we were kids and put them back together. And now he works for Google. And one of the things I do, just as a part of being his younger brother, is that I always call him about new technology. Whenever there's something new out, I always hit him up. Like, hey, man, I'm thinking about getting a tablet. What do you think about the Chrome or the Google Pixelbook? What do you think about the new iPad? And after that, I don't have to say a thing. He will take the conversation in as many different directions as I'll allow him, because I picked him as a key informant, as a star of this show, who can then expound upon a topic and tell me all of the ins and outs. And embedded in that example is the idea that you want to find, or you want to interview, key informants, right? You want to spend some time thinking about who would be the star of this show. Who would be a good key informant who would provide the kind of detail, the kind of elaboration that would really enrich our understanding of this topic so that we can have a better idea of what's going on here. Okay. Now let's compare focus groups and interviews. So here's what you get out of both. Like, they're both flexible. You can ask the kinds of questions that you want. You can invite as many people as you want, at least in terms of a focus group. You can invite certain types of people depending on your research question. Both of them provide really rich data. I mean, you can probe and go deep in either kind of these. Relatively, I'd argue you can go a little deeper with interviews because there's some benefits to an interview. They both provide suggestive results. I snuck that in there because that's something I want to emphasize. These are not conclusive pieces of evidence. They are suggestive in the sense that they can clarify other project results. So other kinds of research that you conduct might be a bit more quantitative, or they might deal with numbers a little bit more than exploratory research does. Right? In an interview, you might get a lot of quotes. In a focus group, you might get a lot of good transitions or testimonials or reactions to your product. In a survey, in an experiment, you're going to get numbers. What does a 7 on a scale mean in people's language? What is a 5? What's a 2? Do they use different words? Do they react in a different way? These types of exploratory research can help inform, clarify the results that you conduct at other points in the process. But what's different between these two? Let me get out the way. So focus groups, I argue, you get more feedback in the sense that you get a higher quantity of participants, right? So you get different perspectives. So it starts to feel like you're getting close to a conclusion, but it's still suggestive because relatively compared to other kinds of research, it's still a small group of people who are responding to your thing. You might get more creative responses because, again, the social dynamics of the group setting might lead the conversation to go in these nuanced directions that you may not have thought of as a researcher. You might have your list of questions, but because you have a particularly special group of individuals, you might have uncovered a topic that you didn't think about before. Okay, and relative to interviews, they're inexpensive because you're requiring less of each individual participant. In a focus group, if you conduct a focus group for an hour and a half with 10 people, you're not requiring each of those 10 people to talk for an hour and a half. Right? Some of those people are going to be listening. Most of them are going to be listening for the majority of the time. Some of them are going to carry on the conversation themselves. But by individual, they will be responsible for a fraction of the amount of time that an interviewer does or an interviewee does. If I'm talking to you one-on-one, I'm expecting you to talk for at least half of the time that was set out for us to talk, right? I might be talking, explaining a question, setting you up. But it's even better if you're talking for more than half of the time. Because if I'm talking too much, I'm not adding anything to what I already know, right? I'm stepping on your time to talk. So on the flip side, interviews, the difference or what separates an interview from a focus group is that there's less social influence. So just by the very nature of the group, right, that is absent in an interview. The social influence that's present is between you, the interviewer, and the interviewee. So that's what allows you to greater ability to probe and discuss more sensitive topics, that they're only concerned with how they come across to you, the researcher, not you, the researcher, your assistant, and the other people in the focus group. What I'm going to show you on Blackboard is another example interview that's really old, right? Again, this is something that you can easily conduct virtually or in person as long as you're safe, distanced, masked, all of that. But I will definitely make sure to put this on Blackboard. By the time you see me again, your first team assignment will be due on Monday, and then we'll be talking about other kinds of research design, namely descriptive and causal research design. See you then.